Well, we're interrupting that edition of the stream to bring you some breaking news. We're bringing you live footage now from the Green Zone in Baghdad, where we understand hundreds of mourners have entered the Green Zone and are attempting to storm the US Embassy in Baghdad. Now, this follows those deadly airstrikes on the Shia armed group Hezbollah brigades, those airstrikes happening in the last 48 hours. At least 27 people were killed. And those funerals are taking place today. Now, Al Jazeera's Simona Foltine is in Baghdad. She's in the Green Zone where those protests are taking place. Simona, just bring us up to date. What's happening where you are?
Well, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people have entered the Green Zone and are marching towards the embassy. I'm currently at the outer gate of the U.S. Embassy, which is located perhaps 300 or 400 meters away from the actual entrance. And this entire funeral procession, consisting mostly of PMF members and their followers, have basically entered through this gate without any resistance whatsoever by the Iraqi security forces that are supposed to guard the Green Zone, which means that basically the Iraqi government is supporting this march and possibly also the messages that they're trying to pass. They're chanting anti-American slogans. They're basically calling on the U.S. to withdraw from Iraq, and they say that they will achieve that through military or through political means. But for now, this entire procession has basically reached the U.S. Embassy. This is quite a significant development. We've seen in the past perhaps one occasion where anti-government protesters were able to enter the Green Zone, but I don't believe we have seen such a large number of people come this close to the U.S. Embassy. So it remains to be seen how the authorities will react, and more importantly, how the U.S. will react.
So, Simona, how close are you to the US Embassy? Can you see any kind of confrontation there? I mean, how close are the protesters getting to that embassy building, which one must assume is very heavily defended?
Yeah, so I'm currently around 300 meters away from the actual building. I can see it. I can see the masses marching towards it. So far, there is no indication that there are armed confrontations. Cannot hear any kind of gunfire or anything like that. Just people are passing by, chanting anti-U.S. slogans, and they're being allowed to go through. And as far as I can see, it seems that they have basically reached the embassy by now, and that is their aim. The question remains: what will happen once they settle down there? Will the U.S. try to push them back? Will it respond in any manner? And how long will they stay there?
Simone, give us, for viewers who are perhaps not so familiar with the Iraqi capital, who are not familiar with the Green Zone, just talk to us more about what the Green Zone is and why it's so significant that this large number of protesters were able to descend on what is normally a very fortified area.
So the Green Zone houses a number of government institutions. It also has several embassies, including the U.S. Embassy, and also the United Nations. And it was temporarily opened up to the public before anti-government protests began. Since then, it has been closed down again, and it's impossible to actually enter this fortified zone without having a special badge. But of course, this is of course not being enforced at the moment because these huge masses of people were allowed to enter without any sort of effort to try to prevent them. And it's really quite remarkable, and it's a sign that the government is standing behind the PMF, that the government is supporting this march as well as the message that they're trying to pass.
Now, this comes at a time of significant turmoil in Baghdad because not just in Baghdad, in Iraq on the whole, the last few weeks and months have been marked by significant amounts of protest, and the government itself is in quite a tricky spot. Can you just talk us through some of the recent events and how you think this march on the US Embassy plays into all of that?
Well, it's this March, and basically the U.S. strikes, they further complicate an already very precarious situation in Iraq. The government has been besieged after 3 months of anti-government protests. It is weakened, it is divided, and this kind of protest against U.S. presence only adds to what is already an extremely complicated situation. Now, it's very difficult to say whether these recent rocket attacks against bases where the U.S. Is stationed and the response by the U.S. to target the PMF is at all related to the protest. Of course, there have been a lot of rumors here in Iraq, unconfirmed rumors, that the U.S. is somehow encouraging these protests or somehow behind, but there is no evidence whatsoever for that. But it is something that could have prompted some of these armed groups to launch attacks against these bases in the first place. Now, the question is, what can the Iraqi government here really do? Based on the statements that we have seen come out of the government yesterday, it very much condemned these U.S. strikes. It seems to be standing very strongly with the PMF, and it has not really condemned the rocket attacks against bases where U.S. are based. So it very much seems that the government will not take a strong stand against these rocket attacks. It will stand with the PMF, and it remains to be seen whether this will result in an actual formal effort to table a bill to expel foreign troops, because this is something only the government can do. Parliament cannot initiate legislation to expel foreign troops. So we'll be watching whether the Prime Minister's office, which is of course in a caretaker role after Adel Abdel Mahdi resigned, will actually support such a bill.
And where do the Iraqi people, where do they stand with this precarious situation? Just as we're speaking, Simona, we're showing our viewers pictures from just outside the US Embassy. We can see there significant numbers of people slightly earlier were gathering outside the gates of the US Embassy. Now, Simona, as we were saying, there have been significant amounts of protest from all sides of Iraqi society. Where are the Iraqi people right now when it comes to this power struggle and this power play between the alleged foreign influence in Iraqi politics right now?
Well, that is a very good question, and it's complicated because you certainly have parts of the population that are more sympathetic to the U.S. than others, because they see it as a necessary counterbalance to Iranian influence here in the country. Now, of course, one of the defining features of these anti-government protests that started in October has been complete rejection of any outside influence, especially Iranian influence. And the question is whether people will stand behind the PMF, because, of course, the U.S. strike on Iraqi forces is a foreign interference, excuse me, or whether they will actually support the U.S. airstrikes against these Iranian groups, because they see it as a way of standing up to Iran's influence in Iraq, which they feel the government isn't doing.
Just a reminder for our viewers who are watching these pictures at home, we are bringing you images of the US Embassy in Baghdad, recorded just moments ago. Significant numbers of protesters have gathered outside the US Embassy. This is in the normally heavily fortified Green Zone, and these protesters are denouncing those airstrikes, US airstrikes, in Iraq, which had targeted the Shia armed group Hezbollah brigades, killing at least 27 Shia fighters. Simona Foltine is Al Jazeera's correspondent in Baghdad. Simona, just give us a sense of the atmosphere. You are in the midst of these protesters who are gathering in the Green Zone, who are marching towards the US Embassy. Those funerals, have they taken place already, or are we expecting this unrest to continue for several hours?
So I have seen processions of cars bearing the bodies of some of the Hezbollah brigade fighters who were killed. People were bidding their goodbyes. They were kissing the trucks and basically bidding their respect Now, this procession is quite long. I marched together with the procession from the beginning across the hanging bridge to the green zone, and now I'm currently standing still in a spot about 200-300 meters from the U.S. Embassy. And for the past 10 minutes or so, there has been a steady flow of people. So this is quite a large procession. I would say at this point we're talking about thousands of people. The atmosphere is still peaceful. People are chanting slowly, but there has not been any sort of violence at the moment. I have not seen even any burning of U.S. flags. Of course, people are bearing posters that cross out President Donald Trump's face or that basically reject the United States. But so far, these processions appear to be peaceful.
OK, Simona Faltin, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you very much indeed for bringing us the latest. Just so viewers are aware of what is happening, we are bringing you live images from Baghdad, where there are large processions taking place. Large numbers of protesters have gathered in Baghdad. And as we were hearing from Al Jazeera's Simona Faltin, those protesters had made their way into the heavily fortified Green Zone, and several hundred protesters had made it to the US Embassy and were protesting outside the US Embassy. Let's get more on this now from Ahmed Rushdie. He's a political analyst and director of the House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Would you say these protests that we're seeing in Baghdad right now, how significant would you say these are?
Well, actually, those protesters came not from Tahrir Square. They came from the area which is adjacent to the Green Zone, would show you that the military forces, the security forces there helped them to enter the Green Zone, to make the protester, to make them actually reach the American embassy. Of course, they are more supporters for the Kataib Hezbollah, which are attacked yesterday by the American forces, by the American airplanes. And it should stay there for about 1 hour, and then it should be dissolved. They will not stay there in the Green Zone. They will be outside the Green Zone after 1 hour. That's what they have been told for them, in a way or another.
So how much coordination do you think there is with the Iraqi government on this? And why is this significant?
I think they take the acceptance of the Iraqi government to do this demonstration, and they take the acceptance of the Minister of Interior about this demonstration near the American embassy. It's not adjacent or, let's say, in front of the American embassy. It's near the American embassy in a way or another, because it's so dangerous that they will be reaching near the American embassy. But I think it will be dissolved soon, and it is a signal that the Iraqi government not accepting something happened, what's happened yesterday in one another. But I think by time there will be some sort of response from other PMF forces, and they will make more demonstrations against the American embassy in Baghdad.
What message do you think the Iraqi government are trying to send here to the Americans?
It's supposed to be you are in the Iraqi soil, so you're supposed to be not marginalize the Iraqi government. And what actually the Americans told so many times the Prime Minister is that we have been attacked so many times, and you should do something. But the resigned Prime Minister actually that cannot help in a way or another to stabilize the situation between Kataib Hezbollah and the American forces in Iraq. So it's a message is that we are eager to have some sort of a strong response against any attacks it will happen in the future against any troops from the PMF or from the Iraqi forces that it's supposed to be claimed they attacked American forces.
Well, this is coming at a time of significant upheaval in Iraq. The Iraqi government is dealing with large numbers of protests from Iraqi civilians who are unhappy at the level of interference, as they put it, in Iraq's domestic affairs. How do you think this impacts the situation as it stands? How do you think the Iraqi people will view these protests which are taking place in the Green Zone?
Well, the Marja'iyya said it clearly and obviously, is that the Iraqi government should leech any attacks that happen on any forces on the Iraqi soil, because it's its responsibility. So what we are seeing now, it's more political rather than to be civilian protesters or civilian demonstrations. That it show you at the end, it's getting more and more advanced for the bad relationship between the Iraq and the U.S., especially the Iraqi government. And I think by time we're going to lose the support of the whole international community. So it needs to be managed well. I mean, the relationship between the Iraqi government and the U.S. In a way or another, because we all know that we already have Daesh, we already have so many security problems, and we have already also so many financial problems. So I think by time, either the Iraqi government going to control those demonstrations and will not accept anymore, or the Iraqi government will solve the problem of attacking American forces on the Iraqi soil. So it is the responsibility of the Iraqi government.
Well, it seems the Iraqi government is in a rather difficult position here, because it doesn't want the Americans to be carrying out attacks on its soil without its consent, but it also has a significant chunk of the population who are very unhappy with groups who appear to be allied with Iran. So which way do you think the Iraqi government is leaning? Is it going to lean eventually towards groups who are more favourable to Iran? Is it going to lean more towards the US? Or ultimately, could it lean more towards the population in Iraq who have been protesting solidly for weeks, if not months now?
Well, I think, and that's why we are in the middle of multiple crises, because the Iraqi government does not have a real decision about to whom should the Iraqi government lean on. To the Iraqi people, to the Iranian, to the Americans, no one knows what's happening. That's why they are smeared to be corrupted, and that's why they are smeared to be dysfunctioned. And I think it will be what's happened those 2-3 days, it will accelerate the acceptance of a candidate that have some sort of a balance as a prime minister, has some sort of a balance between the states and between Washington and Tehran on the Iraqi soil. We need someone like that